An extraordinary phone call by President Trump. President-elect Joe Biden faces a crucial day in the United States Congress and key elections in the state of Georgia to decide who controls the U.S. Senate. Hello, I'm Arnold Knight. This is The Heat. The next few days have major implications for President-elect Joe Biden. On Wednesday, the United States Congress will meet to confirm his victory in the Electoral College. Biden is also anxiously awaiting two runoff elections in Georgia that will determine who controls the U.S. Senate. Meanwhile, President Trump, who still refuses to accept defeat in November's election, has made a controversial telephone call to officials in Georgia asking them to, quote, find votes for him. Our panel will be with us in just a few moments, but we begin with CGTN's Nathan King, who's at the White House. And Nathan, what can you tell us about this controversial telephone call that President Trump had with these officials in Georgia, and what's been the political reaction to it?
Yeah, just quite incredible. Even by the standards of this presidency, this is a shocker and quite stunning. It's an hour-long call, and of course it was leaked from Georgia election officials. In fact, Trump had tried to call them, we understand from media reports, 18 times. And over the course of an hour, listen to the tape twice, you hear him try and charm, cajole, coerce, and essentially, and I don't use the word lightly, corrupt Republican Georgia officials into changing the official result of the election from Joe Biden's win to a win for Donald Trump. And if you don't believe me, just listen to the tape.
So, look, all I want to do is this. I just want to find 11,780 votes, which is one more than we have, because we won the state, and flipping the state is a great testament to our country, because, you know, there's just, it's a testament that they can admit to a mistake, or whatever you want to call it, if it was a mistake. I don't know. A lot of people think it wasn't a mistake.
Now, that was one of the kindest sound bites we could have found, because I can tell you over this call, it is rambling, full of conspiracy theories that are debunked. And on the other end of the call, you don't hear a lot from them. The Georgia election officials essentially rebut the president's arguments point by point. They didn't just do it in the call, by the way. They had a press conference in the last few hours in Georgia as well. With that, essentially saying your data is wrong, Mr. President. Now, under normal circumstances, sorry, you're hearing Marine One, by the way, coming in here. The president's going to head to Georgia for a speech not so long because of the Senate runoff. But the noise aside, under normal circumstances, you would probably have a bipartisan group of politicians essentially calling on a president to resign after a call like this, or impeachment proceedings. You could even think of the cabinet meeting and potentially moving him aside. None of that is happening. Essentially, what is happening is that the president's supporters in Congress, in the Senate, as well as in the House, are going to move on Wednesday to basically support his baseless claims, even though evidence of fraud in the election has been absent, except perhaps for Saturday's call. I mean, the Democrats are asking for an FBI investigation. There are potentially laws being broken both at the federal and the Georgia state level about interfering in election results. Remember, he's out of power in 16 days, it looks like.
Nathan, let's talk about Wednesday. That's when the U.S. Congress meets. It could be another dramatic day here in Washington, D.C. What can we expect?
Yeah, well, this is the new Congress. You saw Nancy Pelosi narrowly winning the House of Representatives speakership on Sunday. The new Senate, slightly less controversial, although remember, there's still two Senate seats to be decided in Georgia, which decides the balance of power. But normally, this is just a ceremonial pro forma move where the vice president sitting, Mike Pence, opens the envelopes, essentially, game show style, from the state's electoral colleges and would say Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, president and vice president, sworn in January 20th. Well, under the rules, there can be some objections. And I said those senators and House Republicans will be objecting. It's not going to change the result. They'll have a couple of hours of debate. Both leaders from both parties are urging their parties to go along with this. But less certain is a big demonstration that's being organized here by Trump supporters. I can tell you they're already here, and there is not a great atmosphere both on the 5th and the 6th here in Washington, D.C. It's being encouraged by the president. As you know, we've seen a lot of tension on the streets this year. Intimidation, perhaps violence. It's a very worrying time. So, you know, even though the president is leaving office, it looks like, in 16 days, it's going to be a long 16 days.
Thanks, Nathan. That's CGTN's Nathan King reporting from the White House. Well, let's get to our panel right now. Joining me here in Washington, D.C. is Ameshia Cross. She is a Democratic Party strategist. With us, too, from South Carolina is Eric Bolling. He is a political commentator and author and is the host of America This Week with Eric Bolling. Also joining us from Washington, D.C. is Joseph Williams. He is senior news editor at U.S. News and World Report. And from New York, we are joined by Aaron Maté. He is a contributor to The Nation magazine and host of Pushback with Aaron Maté on the Grayzone. Thank you, everyone, for being with us. Ameshia Cross, let me start with you. You are the Democratic Party strategist, and let's start with this controversial telephone call that President Trump made to these officials in the state of Georgia. What do you make of it?
Well, it's more par for the course for Donald Trump. I'll tell you one thing. This is a president who has gotten caught up more by his own words and recordings over the past 4 years than anyone else in history. He should know by now that these aren't the avenues for him to make these types of comments. But the issue here that is extremely grave is the fact that Donald Trump not only used quid pro quo in this call, not only wanted Raffensperger to find votes, not only basically threatened him in this call, but this is a president who made the call from the White House with several White House officials, including the White House chief of staff, sitting right next to him. And not a single person thought that it was wrong for him not only to have these types of conversations, but also try to pull him back. In fact, we saw from the White House chief of staff that he was encouraging a lot of this conversation. This is a president who is unhinged at a time when he should be focusing on uniting the Republican Party and getting Georgia out to vote for these 2 Republican senators. He decides that he's going to lean back on his own election that has been decided. Georgia has already recounted, did a hand recount 3 times. They've counted more the November election than any other state in this country. And he just flat out lost and cannot accept it.
Eric, Democrats, as you can hear, are slamming the president over this telephone call. Here is Vice President-elect Kamala Harris. Let's listen.
Well, it was, yes, certainly the voice of desperation. Most certainly that. And it was a bald-faced, bold abuse of power by the President of the United States.
So, Eric, we hear the president being accused of abusing power. I mean, it looks very much like a lost battle. What is the president's defense on this?
You know, it's hard to defend that conversation. I can only say that it's terrible when you have to have a call from the Oval Office and have that being taped and then leaked later to the Washington Post, which is arguably the biggest enemy to the president over the last 4 or 5 years, including with the Russian collusion accusation. So I can't defend the comments. I don't think it was wise of him to do it. I certainly don't think it was wise of him to do it on the heels of a very important Georgia vote. He may have put Kelly Loeffler's seat at risk. I don't think he put David Perdue's seat at risk. I think it will end up being the Senate will still be retained by the Republicans. I can't defend it. I can only tell you what I've told you week in and week out, Arnon, is that Donald Trump is now playing the long game, not as President 45, maybe as President 47, and also the long game being what he's going to do over the next 4 years. Again, he will hold 76, 75 million people voted for him. He will hold the keys to anyone on the right that wants to go into public office to be elected as a Republican. The only way you're going to do it going forward is by kissing the ring of Donald Trump, and I think that's what he's doing. He's saying, I lost, it was stolen from me, I'm going to fight till the bitter end, till I have to, and then he's going to work it out as a kingmaker going forward.
Right, given all that, Eric, and as you rightly point out, 75 million people did vote for him, but there's now talk of an FBI investigation.
Yeah. So I don't buy into these theories of we're putting the democracy at risk. The democracy will just fine. I don't buy into these theories. Have we ever seen it? Have we ever seen anyone do anything that is so egregious? Richard Nixon broke in, had people break in on his behalf and listen, violating countless illegal searches and seizures, violating people's rights. no one spends time. If everyone's looking for Donald Trump behind bars, I wouldn't hold my breath. I know a lot of people on this panel probably are.
Joseph Williams, we heard there Eric tell us some of the reasons that's motivating the president right now. He's possibly looking far ahead to 2024. But what is your view on what's happened over the past few days?
Well, I mean, the simple answer is that it's just remarkable in every sense of the word. I mean, you have a sitting president violating not only the Hatch Act, but being encouraged to do this by some of his supporters. We have a president who doesn't believe in the fact that he lost and doesn't seem to accept that he lost. If he's playing a long game, it's hard to know exactly what that long game is when the president lost by 7 million votes to a candidate who was left for dead 6 months before the election. So it's hard to understand if this is a clever ploy by a fox, getting ready to stroll into the henhouse. How can this actually make him look better in the eyes of the 13 million people who didn't vote for him? So I don't really understand what this is all about, other than the fact that Donald Trump is not behaving in a rational or even a sane manner, and I use that word very weightily. We have here a lot of norms that have been broken by a norm-breaking president. This has been the pattern over the course of years. And to say that it is not a threat of democracy, I think undercuts or doesn't take seriously the weight of what has happened here. I think that it is going to jeopardize, if not endanger, the 2 Republican seats in Georgia. The president is leaning on a Georgia state election official for 16 electoral votes that wouldn't even come close to putting him towards 270. Mm-hmm. So it's hard to understand why this is a particular obsession of the president's, in that it wouldn't help him stay in office. So it's just a really bizarre melange of things that just
maybe you didn't hear me, sir. Maybe you didn't hear me. I didn't suggest that he thought he was going to win or overturn an election. I'm saying he's doing what the 75 million people who voted for him, or a vast majority of those people, want him to do: fight for the win. They want to see him as the fighter, the power broker going forward. That's it.
Is it really true that the people who saw him lose? Is this really true what they want him to do, or is this just a vocal minority?
Yes, you're not paying attention. You're not paying attention.
I beg your pardon.
You're not paying attention. You're not paying attention. If you're
okay, one at a time.
No, I was trying to finish my sentence, but go ahead.
Okay. Look, I want to go to New York. I want to bring Erin Matte into this conversation. Erin, on the Sunday political talk shows here in the United States, we heard words like traitors, sedition. There's even speculation that the U.S. military might get involved. In fact, there was a New York Times headline which said, Trump's call leaves allies fearful for American democracy. So there's a larger question here. I mean, what does this say about the political situation in the United States today?
I think it says we're a failed state. I don't think the military will be involved. I think what Trump is doing is all bluster. I do think it raises questions about his mental state, but if there is a method here, I think he's just grifting. This whole stop the steal thing has been very profitable for him. He's fundraised tens of millions of dollars off of it, and I think ultimately that's what his aim is here. And I think that in 16 days it will all be over, at least with him no longer being in the Oval Office. I do think he'll continue to try to pretend that he's the president from his estate in Florida, but I hope that the rest of the country will move on. I'm not as sure that his supporters will be in lockstep with him. This I think has a certain shelf life, because it's just so ridiculous. And his conspiracy theories about rigged voting machines and foreign money is ludicrous. But there's a broader problem, which is that Democrats did attempt their own version of this when they accused him of being a Russian agent. And they weaponized the intelligence agencies to pursue that conspiracy theory. So unfortunately, both sides, Trump and his opponents, have legitimated a playbook that I think will have far-reaching consequences and will require, for any kind of progress, both sides to do some soul-searching.
Ameshia, I want to ask you to respond to 2 points that Erin Matte just made there. One is that this points to a failed state. The other, that this is tit for tat. This is what Democrats did to Donald Trump when he came to office 4 years ago.
So I thought that when he mentioned something that Democrats did, he was going to bring up the Bush-Kerry and Bush-Gore races, in which there were Democrats, there were ranking Democrats who actually challenged some of the electoral wins in key battleground states like Ohio. But I would argue that that wasn't done at the octane level that we've seen this. In this election cycle, we've seen Donald Trump challenge state after state after state and get lawsuits thrown out left, right, and sideways because they were brought in under this faulty pretense of there being some type of electioneering and scams and just lies that were produced virtually, in large part, via social media that he actually retweeted and shared and talked about himself quite often. I think that if you're going to bring up a similarity, you could go back to 2004, you could go back to 2001, you could talk about some of those instances where we saw Democrats lodge things in states that were won by Republicans, but it was not with the fervor and it was not with the push that we've seen Donald Trump do. In those cases, Democrats raised them largely because they were basically doing a procedural piece to ensure that voting rights and voting access was going to be allowed across states where we've seen that black votes have been suppressed greatly. Donald Trump doesn't have an animus here other than to grift and to try to make a move towards his next thing, whatever that thing happens to be. It has nothing to do with preserving our democracy. It honestly has nothing to do with the Republican Party because he's absolutely fine ripping that party to shreds.
Aaron, what's your response to that?
Well, I agree that Trump is a grifter. I'm just saying the Democrats face a problem of consistency here, where I do think that the whole Russia thing was a scam as well. They accused Trump of being a Russian conspirator, and it was ludicrous. And they embraced a series of ludicrous conspiracy theories, a compromising tape of Trump with prostitutes, secret communications between a Trump server and a Russian bank server, Michael Cohen visiting Prague. Those were conspiracy theories in the same way that Trump's conspiracy theories about voting machines are conspiracy theories as well. So what I'm saying is that both sides, I think, have to account for their own grifts. And unfortunately, now both sides have played a role in legitimizing a playbook where they can falsely accuse the other of being illegitimate presidents based on some kind of foreign conspiracy theory.
Trump is trying to devalue hundreds of thousands of African-American voters. That's why he's targeting Fulton County. That's why he's targeting areas in Detroit. That's why he's targeting Philly. He has a very strategic motive here.
But I also would disagree. I also would push back against the notion that it's a both sides kind of thing. I mean, in the first instance, when you're talking about the Russia investigation, there was no one in the Democratic Party who accused Trump of being a Russian agent. What was accused was that he was elected with the help of the Russian party, or with the help of the Russian state and the Russian Communist Party. There was no embrace on the Democratic Party side of the so-called tape that was out there. As a matter of fact, there was a lot. Hang on. There was a lot of rejection of that. And thirdly, those who did kind of see it as a conspiracy theory, once it was debunked, everyone moved on. Here we have an instance where the president is repeatedly embracing conspiracy theories and pressuring officials. And the other thing that I would want to point out is the fact that if you're suggesting that this is a grift, I don't think a grift goes on for quite this long, and I don't think a grift involves calling a representative on a private White House line that no one will know about until the tape is leaked.
Yeah, all right. Aaron, a quick response from you, and then I want to get to Eric. I know he has something to say on this. Go ahead, Aaron.
It's simply not true that Democrats did not call Trump an agent of Russia. That's all they did for many years. Even after the Mueller investigation, that still went on. And that does not mean that anything that Trump is doing is legitimate. It's abhorrent what Trump is doing. It's unhinged and it's deranged. And I do agree that there's a racist motivation. I'm just pointing out that it has been profitable for his operation. They've made a lot of money off of it. But it's just a fact that Democrats embrace conspiracy theories of their own when it came to Russia.
All right, Eric, go ahead.
So here's the deal. What no one is doing here right now is putting themselves in the seat of the loser. And I think Trump is a smart enough businessman. He's been around long enough to realize he lost the election. What this is, as I said, going forward, he is setting up his next 4 or 8 or how many years. I spoke to Trump. This is a 100% honest to God true story. About 3 weeks ago, I get a phone call. I'm watching a football game. It's the White House, the president for you, sir. I talked to Trump and I said to him, do you understand that you will be the biggest media personality on the planet after whatever happens? He went forward with, I'm going to fight this. They stole it from us. But here it is. They stole it from us. That's going to be the tagline for the next iteration of Trump. And my guess it will be some sort of media, either with Fox or not with Fox, on their own. But he will be set up in Mar-a-Lago. It will be the power broker center of the Republican Party going forward. And they stole it from us. That's going to be the tagline that unites the MAGA people who are now hurt that they lost. Well, we could never have lost. We must have been stolen. It must have been stolen from us. That will unite them around that guy, and he will continue to go forward. You may not like it. You may call it a grift, but the man is setting himself up to be the power broker going forward, something that a lot of people would love to do. I'm sure something that Hillary would have loved to have done had she been smart enough to figure it out when she lost.
Yeah. Joseph, I want to shift focus now from what's been happening in Washington to what's happening in the state of Georgia, two very important U.S. Senate elections, which could determine the who controls the Senate in Washington. What is your take on what's going on?
Well, the take is that the race is neck and neck if you believe what few polls are out there. The turnout has been incredible. In some senses, it passed the turnout for the presidential election. I think the Democrats are highly motivated. I also think that the Republicans are getting a mixed message. And there is some evidence of a splintering of the vote down there for the Republican Party, that some people are trying to understand what the president really wants them to do. On the one hand, he says the systems are illegitimate. On the other hand, he says go out and vote to preserve a majority in Congress. Both of those things can't be true at the same time. And I think Republicans are trying to have to separate themselves between what they think and what they believe. And I believe what they believe is that a Republican in Congress is going to be far better. So it would be far better to vote in a quote-unquote rigged election and have the outcome turn in their favor than it would be to stay home, particularly as the Democratic energy has been so high.
Aaron Maté, one other big political development in Washington, and that was the re-election of Nancy Pelosi as Speaker in the House of Representatives. Now, we know that progressives are deeply angry over this because some of the more left-leaning groups in Congress, known as the Squad, gave their votes. They voted for her without actually demanding anything in return. Was this really a huge lost opportunity?
I think it was. I think that they had some rare leverage here. They could have used it to win some significant concessions, like, for example, holding a floor vote on Medicare for all. They claim that they won something in terms of putting a repeal of the pay-go measure on the table, which would, they say, make the path forward towards Medicare for all easier. I'm not convinced. We'll see if it actually passes the full Congress. But yeah, there are a lot of people who, on the progressive side, who are upset with the Squad here because they saw a rare moment of leverage where Nancy Pelosi, who has a record of failure. I mean, after all, under her, in this most recent election, Democrats lost seats. So why give her, without any concessions, another mandate? I think that was unfortunate.
Ameshia, what is
there is a reason. There is a very smart reason, and the Squad was very smart to let her win that and not chime in. It's very simple. Think about this for a second. Midterm elections of the incumbent president's party tend to get smashed, and there is good indication that Republicans would or could take the House in 2022. No one on the Squad wants to say they unseated Nancy Pelosi only to lose the House.
Right. Ameshia, we could have a situation where Mitch McConnell could retain leadership in the U.S. Senate if the Republicans win just one of those seats in Georgia. We could have Nancy Pelosi, who's Speaker of the House of Representatives. It looks very much like where we came from, doesn't it?
Absolutely. I think that is something that is definitely understood by Democrats on the ground in Georgia and the organizations that are pushing Democratic voters to get out the vote. I think that part of that is also, it's more than just the balance of power conversation right now. It's one of the reasons why Nancy Pelosi's record for the past 4 years has been what it is because no matter what the House Democrats pass, it died blatantly once it got to the Senate. And I think that for Nancy Pelosi and for Democrats in general, the recognition that they need to quell the power of Mitch McConnell is absolutely here. That recognition also exists among Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. They know that there is very little that can be done, even the campaign promises that were made on the stump speeches and on the ground, if Mitch McConnell maintains that level of power. These 2 Senate seats in Georgia have to go to Democrats, or else, for the most part, aside from, doing a whole lot of executive orders, all just might be lost.
Joseph Williams, doesn't this signify, when we look at the re-election of Nancy Pelosi, doesn't it signify that it's business as usual? To the larger electorate, they look at this and say, this is what is going on, nothing's going to change.
It's hard to get out of that mindset. I mean, simply because you have the same faces. And Nancy Pelosi is going to turn 80 in the coming year, or she is 80 right now. She'll be 81 in the coming year. The ranking members all are north of 65, 70 years old. And it is frustrating for a lot of voters to see that the power structure is so entrenched, particularly among a party that's supposed to be welcoming of all voices, you still have a rigid kind of power structure. So it could be disappointing. However, the one thing you can't refute is that when Pelosi has a hand, she plays it to the best of her ability. I mean, she's very smart, very savvy. So I think that in the long run, you may see some frustration. In the short run, you'll see some frustration. In the long run, it may work out. We'll see.
Okay, Eric, very quickly, I've got less than a minute. This certification process that takes place on Wednesday in Congress, or ratification as it's called, it shows a big split in the Republican Party, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's the anti-Trump versus, actually, you know what it is? I take that back. It's everyone who has an eye to run in 2024 for president is going to get on board. It goes to what I said earlier in the segment, where the people have to, anyone who wants to be an elected official, wants to be the Democrat, has to make sure they're embraced by the MAGA wing of the party. It's legit, it's real, and it's going to be around for a while.
Okay, Joseph Williams, what's your thinking on that? What's going to happen on Wednesday?
Wednesday, and if I were to make a prediction, I would probably be wrong one way or the other. And the one thing I've learned in Washington, in 2020, don't predict a race.
Okay, so you think it'll go according to plan?
We may be in for a surprise. I think it might be a split. Which split it will happen, it's anybody's guess. I think Warnock is in a very strong position. I think Perdue is stronger but has some vulnerabilities. Whether Ossoff can take him with a strong ground game, I think remains to be seen.
Okay, Ameshia Cross, what are your thoughts on that?
We're still going to be counting votes after the election, obviously, because in Georgia, the mail-in votes aren't counted until after the other votes are counted. So we know that hundreds of thousands of mail-in votes are there, and it's going to be a while, just like on election night in November. It's going to be a minute before we know who actually won this one. But I think that Democrats stand a really good chance.
Right, Erin Mattei, forgotten in all of this, of course, was that stimulus bill. Americans will get $600 in that stimulus bill. There were calls for $2,000. Do you think we'll ever get to $2,000?
Well, it depends what happens in Georgia.
It's as simple as that. So do you believe that Joe Biden will sign off a bill that, if he gets the Senate as well, that gives people...
I wish he had weighed in on that. He didn't really. We didn't actually find out whether Joe Biden supports a $2,000 check or not. And I hope that he weighs in, especially after Georgia, where if Democrats manage to pick it up, then that is a very real possibility.
Okay. And that's where we have to leave it. Thanks to all of you for being with us. I'm Anand Naidu. You've been watching The Heat.